Hi, I'm Sandy Goldberg from Antenna Audio. Welcome to the podcast series from Emory University's Carlos Museum. This time, instead of one object sparking our conversation, we're using a number of objects, all from the art of the ancient Americas, and all having to do with body modification. I'm joined by Rebecca Stone, curator of ancient American art, and a little while later, to get the contemporary angle, we have some comments from some local tattoo parlors and piercing shops in Atlanta, Georgia. So Rebecca, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I was really looking forward to this conversation because I see so much tattooing going on and body modification. It's not really even alternative anymore, one could say. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to ask you where some of this tradition might have come from in terms of the ancient Americas specifically.
Well, in ancient times, I think people did have very extravagantly patterned bodies in various ways. And in our collection, we have representations of very large and impressive jewelry, ear spools, we call them, because they're shaped like a spool of thread with a very large post that goes through a very large hole in your earlobe.
I always wondered how they stayed on.
Well, there's a certain amount of tension in the hold, and the elasticity of it comes back to hold it in. But we have a nice pair of ear spools in the collection made out of silver with little birds on them. And we still have the textile that's been tied to the back part of the ear spool. And you could tie 2 ties behind your neck, and that would basically help tie them on.
And what other kinds of body adornments do you have in the collection?
We have what are called labrettes, which are a type of jewelry that you put underneath your lip that goes through the skin into the inside of your mouth. There are not so many rings for fingers and bracelets, some bracelets, but we also have evidence of marking the skin in various ways. One of the most characteristic types of things that they did in ancient Central America especially was to use roller stamps, which are like a cylindrical object that you put a stick through, like a rolling pin, and they're carved in a design. You put pigment on them and you roll it, say, down your thigh or around your ankle, and you transfer a geometric or some other kind of pattern to your skin. So these roller stamps were a very important type of patterning of the body that would be temporary.
And what did they use for the color?
Well, we did actually scientific testing on one of our roller stamps. It's actually more called a seal because it has a little handle and you just press it against your skin.
Sort of like sealing a letter in wax?
Yes, that's right. That piece we studied, there were bits of pigment that were still coming off of it, and we scientifically studied them, and they are made out of earth. They're made out of dirt, but they also mixed in titanium, which is white, to lighten the color of the earth so that they were modifying the color. The color that they made the pigment into is basically the color of those people's skin, a light reddish-brown color, so that the pattern would have been visible mainly as a texture more than a color in that instance.
What would have been the purpose then, if you really couldn't see it?
One of the most important elements in ancient American art is that you don't always do things for an audience, because often your audience is more of a supernatural audience. It wasn't really for the consumption of other people. It was to change you in some way, to transform you.
So it wasn't really meant to be beautiful in the way that we think of painting oneself?
I think beauty is a very difficult thing to reconstruct cross-culturally. I think that they thought that all of these very beautiful ear spools and jewelry were, in fact, highly prestigious and aesthetically pleasing, or they wouldn't have gone to all the trouble to make them and explore difficult techniques to make them in. But there's always symbolism that's deeper. The blue-green of turquoise is the color of water, the color of growing plants, the color of life itself. And the nahuatl, which is the Aztec language, the nahuatl word for green stone is also the word for precious. Chalchihuitl is preciousness in general. Preciousness is green. I do think that beauty was a byproduct of the symbolic content of these body ornamentations.
So these ideas you're talking about with the jewelry, do they relate to the patternings that people would put on their bodies as well?
Often they would be more deeply symbolic of your ability to transform into an animal, so that you would pattern your body with spots that would show, I can turn into an animal during a visionary state, because shamanism is so important in the Americas.
Now what about tattooing? Did they do permanent designs on the body as well?
We have some evidence that they did. We have found a few bodies, one recently from Peru, of a woman with tattoos on her arms that show that, yes, they permanently put the designs into their body.
In general, do you think there was more body adornment for men or for women?
I would say generally that piercing has to do more with showing status, perhaps political and economic power. What went into the piercing, large ear spools and labrettes, those indicate more the social and political and economic status of the person, and that tends to be male. And then the skin decoration feels like it's more about the spiritual realm for both males and females. We have many images of females, and many of them are covered with these beautiful body painting, roller-stamped patterns all over their bodies, and they show them with large staring eyes, which to me indicates that they're in trance. And so their body art is indicating their spiritual power. And in fact, we have a very extraordinary piece from ancient Peru, from the Chancay culture. It's from about 1000 AD, and she's a very flat figure with short arms and a almost completely squared off head. She's very interesting to us about her body art and what it means, because her torso is painted with dark brown, and at first glance it would look like they've painted on a shirt or a tunic that she's wearing. But in fact, her nipples are shown so that it's not like a shirt which would have covered her breasts. We also have very clear proof that this is not showing a shirt, but it's in fact showing how her body was decorated, because there's a small place where there's the impression of a textile, a real textile, that shows she was wearing an actual dress made out of cloth.
Oh, so she was dressed.
She was dressed, and this was what was underneath. These white spots on the dark brown have always been elusive to me. I've had trouble deciding what animal or what this might symbolize. Now, often you will decorate your body in ancient times with the animal that you are capable of turning into during a visionary state. That's what shamans do, transform themselves into animals. There are many spotted animals, of course, jaguars and snakes and other types of animals. But across her jaw, in dark brown, is painted a long, wide mouth with a whole series of small serrated teeth from one edge of her jaw to the other. She has a human mouth. It's modeled, pretty little lips that are modeled. So she has two mouths, one of which is two-dimensional that she painted on her body, and the other is her regular mouth. This wide mouth of teeth was the clue that made me change my mind that I think her animal spirit is in fact a whale shark, which is a spotted shark with a 5-foot wide mouth full of tiny serrated teeth. And they have white spots on dark brown. They also have very squared off blunt heads like her head. And her arms look more like fins.
Oh, like little flippers or something.
Yes, that's right.
Now the paintings on her body, the adornment, is that an essential part of that transformation, or is it the communication about that transformation?
That's an interesting question. I think it's a wonderful way to show that you have your human body, which is three-dimensional, and you have your animal self, which is more elusive, more transitory.
The markings on this piece represent an animal, but what about the stamps you mentioned earlier?